Hello and welcome to Prep Playbook. I'm Jim Rapier, HSSN Managing Producer at NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Week 3 of the prep football season is in the books, and on this week's show, we'll be looking back at some of the past week's action and ahead to some of the games in Week 4. Also, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune prep sports writer Mike Strom is here to give some analysis and provide some scouting reports for some of next week's games. Now let's get started. Mike, Week 3 did not disappoint in terms of exciting games and impressive performances, so let's turn to some highlights from some of the games and sort through some analysis. Jesuit faced Central of Baton Rouge and turned in an impressive performance, and the Blue Jays haven't seemed to miss a beat with Mark Sanji as head coach.
I agree with you, Jim. Jesuit has been played outstanding in their first 3 games. After a close season opening loss at Ponchatoula, they've now won 2 straight. They have a solid senior quarterback in Trey LaForge, a really hot rising junior in Kalijah Lipscomb, who had 4 touchdown catches against Central.
Mike, St. Aug showed its mettle in this game against Covington on the North Shore by finishing strong against the Lions. How are the Purple Knights progressing this year under Cyril Crutchfield?
Well, I think they're coming along just fine. I mean, they're 2-1. That one loss being to Carr, going to Covington and leaving with a victory is normally a difficult proposition. So to win in the manner they have in these 2 of the first 3 games, they're seemingly getting pretty solid play from their sophomore quarterback, Justice McCoy. You have to, if you're a Purple Knight fan, you have to be happy with the way your football team is progressing.
And of course, Stanley Morgan turned in a big game for the Knights, and they were able to pull away after Covington rallied significantly in this game. A good road win for St. Aug here?
Oh, an excellent road win. I mean, again, in Covington, we're talking about a team that was in the Class 5A semifinals a year ago, and it has a decent nucleus back. The fact that it also represented a homecoming of sorts for Cyril Crutchfield, being a Covington person, a native, just made it a little bit sweeter.
Who would have figured that Hahnville would go to overtime a second consecutive week? But that's exactly what happened when they played Landry Walker. Mike, what did you take from this one? It was a wild game.
Well, triple overtime, actually, and it certainly was. I can't say I was surprised to see Hahnville win. I had covered their game the previous week against Rummel, and I left Tiger Stadium in Booty quite impressed by Hahnville. But again, Landry Walker was the number 2 team in the state in Class 4A, so it wasn't a situation where Hahnville was not going to have to earn their victory. Impressive win for Coach Saltaformaggio, something that he really needed, I think, for this reason. They've played a hellacious schedule, and you can play well, but if you don't have something to show for your efforts, the danger then comes in the potential discouragement by the kids. Their big issue now, they lost their junior quarterback for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks with a collarbone injury against Landry Walker. So that's something for Hahnville fans and all the New Orleans prep fans to keep an eye on.
An incredible game there, and let's move on to another one. Powerhouses Rummel and Acadiana tangled on Saturday, and Mike, Rummel just keeps rolling along. What an impressive victory for the Raiders. What did you think?
It was a pleasure to cover that game. I was at Joseph Yenny Stadium Saturday night. I was surprised. Not that I didn't give Rummel a realistic chance of winning, but Acadiana is one of those programs that when you play them, it's generally there's not a lot of cause for optimism. But Rummel, I mean, from start to finish, Rummel really dominated, and dominated is not too strong of a word. I think Rummel's coach Jay Roth acknowledges much after the game that he was surprised at the margin. Now he certainly gave his kids a chance to win coming in, but again, Rummel to beat Acadiana, a defending state champion, so handily, and this is an Acadiana team that returned 11 starters from a year before, in which they had beaten Rummel 42-28 and rushed for 452 yards, which is a Rummel school record by an opponent. There was cause for concern in the Rummel camp, so that win is just in my mind cements Rummel as certainly the team to beat in the Catholic League race. It'll be, tell you where my mind is going now. After that, it's like, man, bring on Rummel and Curtis in the Division I playoffs, and hopefully late in the Division I playoffs.
Well, that's a few weeks down the road in terms of the postseason, but let's start by looking at next week and several games featuring New Orleans area teams. We'll be playing against Baton Rouge area teams. Some of the games we'll look at in this first segment is Easton going to Woodlawn, Rummel versus Catholic of Baton Rouge, and Brother Martin facing East Ascension. What's your take on those matchups, Mike?
Well, Easton Woodlawn. Easton is going to be playing a very competitive Woodlawn of Baton Rouge team that beat Denham Springs in week 1. To this point, you got to say that Easton has been as advertised. Plenty of offensive skill players. Their quarterback, their fine quarterback, Deshaun Capers-Smith, has been just gigantic in his play. They have 2 blue chip receivers in 4 really good receivers, 2 blue chippers in Tyron Johnson, who's a senior this year, and then Kalajuan Chris, nicknamed Clyde, who's is just a junior. I think this will certainly be Easton's top test to this point, but again, we're talking about an Easton team that has scored 40, 59, and 55 points, excuse me. So I'm sure Woodlawn is bracing for the Eagles' visit.
And Rummel, of course, continues with their extremely competitive pre-district schedule, taking on Catholic of Baton Rouge.
Another state top 10 pairing. Last week it was number 1 Rummel against number 4 Acadiana. Now it's the number 1 Raiders against number 5 Catholic of Baton Rouge. And and to top it off, Rummel has to go to Baton Rouge to win. Kind of an interesting little sidelight to this game, or at least from a Rummel perspective. I was speaking with Jay Roth, Rummel's coach, after the Acadiana win, and he, after he had provided me with some thoughts about the game itself, he stopped and he said, the shame is, he said, you can't even enjoy it. I'm already thinking ahead to next week, because he knows the formidable test that Catholic presents. And so anyway, he only took satisfaction in beating Acadiana for a few minutes, and he was already thinking about this one, and probably rightfully so. Catholic High looks like they have a very solid team this year. And one of those tests down the road for Rummel in district may be the Brother Martin Crusaders, who are playing with a lot of momentum right now. I say you got to give Brother Martin props. They are certainly possibly the top story going on in the Catholic League, with all due respect to Rummel. It's hard to argue against number 1, but after consecutive 4-win seasons, the Crusaders are off to a 3-0 start. And what I've been particularly impressed came Friday night, going up to Franklinton, a state-ranked Franklinton team, and beating them 40-21, I believe it was, and in a manner. Martin was in control throughout. Franklin's coach Shane Smith acknowledged as much afterwards. The Crusaders have a solid running game in Jared West and Bruce Jordan Swilling, and a junior quarterback in Jake Brogy, who probably doesn't get the props he deserves. He threw for 3 touchdowns against the Demons. And maybe the top reason for optimism coming out of that game, Brother Martin's defense played well, better than you would think, allowing 3 touchdowns. And that has been something that is an area that they have been looking for improvement after the last couple of seasons.
Mike, Curtis continues its quest against quality competition when it faces Carr this week. What do you think?
Well, I broke the golden rule a couple weeks ago when Curtis played Lufkin, Texas, in Shreveport in the battle on the border. But there's an old rule, if not cliche, never bet against Curtis. So I won't be this week. However, saying that, Carr is plenty good of a football team. This, last year when Carr, St. Augustine, and Curtis got involved in their little three-way round robin in the first 5 weeks of the season, we started calling it the trilogy. All the teams were nationally ranked. Well, this time around, only Curtis is nationally ranked, but it still has merits to being trilogy in class. So I think it's going to be plenty interesting. Carr has a new quarterback in sophomore Alden Clark,
who's played pretty well thus far.
He's played very, very well, and far beyond his years. He's got a lot of talent and skill, and he's got plenty of help. Carr is still very solid on defense, so it's going to be interesting. Now, Curtis has already played some hellacious opponents in Lufkin, and East St. John was no walk in the park last week. Mandeville was a tough opener for him, but I look for a very competitive game this week. And I know final thing I would say was that Carr has an advantage of having had the bye week prior to the game, and you never can discount the value of that.
I'm sure the coaches were busy scouting Curtis every snap last week.
You think?
Looking ahead to District 6-5A, play in that district begins this week. In Ponchatoula, one of the favorites, starts off with Mandeville. And one particular unit on Mandeville that has not struggled too much is their defense. This ought to be a pretty intriguing matchup with the Christian Campbell-led offense of Ponchatoula against the Mandeville defense. Any ideas on how that one might play out?
Well, I'm going to roll with the Greenies and our friend Coach Tierney, his football team. But there's no lack of respect for Guy LeCompte and the Skippers in saying that. I came away from the Curtis Mandeville game in which Curtis prevailed 14-0, very impressed by Mandeville's defense. And so you struck on, to me, the thing to watch for in this game. Ponchatoula triple option on offense, similar to Curtis, and Mandeville proved to be very proficient at defending that. Curtis really didn't run very that well, other than a couple of big runs. The runs in between were basically short bursts. So that's got all the makings. And then finally, Mandeville's a factor every year in the District 6-5A championship picture. And to be the best, another coaching cliche, to be the best, you got to beat the best. Mandeville shared the district title last year with St. Paul's, and no one's more aware than that than Hank Tierney and Ponchatoula.
Last but certainly not least, in a game of improving teams, De La Salle faces an undefeated Thomas Jefferson team. What's your take on this one?
An interesting game. De La Salle is vastly improved from a year ago. Having seen their game against Newman, it was just I couldn't get over how good the Cavaliers looked. And when I say couldn't get over, again, to make such dramatic strides in 1 year. Coach Ryan Manali certainly has some players over there. He moved an all-district linebacker and Cole Lewis to running back, and Cole has been tearing it up. He had over 200 yards and I believe it was 2, maybe 3 touchdowns last week in the victory against Hannon. So they got it going in the right direction, in a positive direction. And the same you can say for Thomas Jefferson. Maybe a little different in flavor than in previous years under Coach Kevin Kelly. The Jaguars are passing the ball with much more proficiency. They have a very good quarterback in Tyler Laverne. And so to me, this ought to be interesting. And it's in a district matchup. Thomas Jefferson from 10-3A, De La Salle from 11-3A. Thomas Jefferson, as we speak, I would think would rate as the 10-3A favorite, and De La Salle is in some tough sledding with Curtis and St. Charles, but
a wee bit tough, huh?
Yeah, just a wee bit. But again, they are certainly proving to be a competent and worthy opponent. So this is an attractive game to keep an eye on.
Well, that leads to the next part, which there's just a ton of attractive games for fans if they're out there and they're in the area and you've got the free time, get to these games. Is it hard to pick which game to go to? There's so many.
This week certainly would fall in that category. Last week was similar. I mean, there was so many games to pick from. If you're asking me for a top game, a favorite game?
Oh, no, I just was saying there's so many attractive games out there, but I can't thank you enough for giving us some analysis, some breakdown of last week, and some look ahead to next week.
Well, thank you.
And don't forget, you can follow all of Mike's work as well as all of our writers' work at highschoolsports.NOLA.com. Well, that's it for this edition of Prep Playbook. For Mike Strom, I'm Jim Rapier. Thanks for clicking on us. We'll see you again next week.